Yeah, as Zoom just announced, we are recording this session. If you choose to stay off video, that's okay, but our preference would be you stay on video, engage and interact with us through the session. You can unmute and speak as required, or text chat is always available for us. A few house cleaning stuff before we proceed. Please check your name in the Zoom participant panel to ensure it is the name as you would wish it to appear on your CCU certificate, including capitalization, including spellings, including any doctor or in any professor that you want to add before your name. So please ensure that the name is correct on Zoom. I'll give you 30 seconds to update in case it's not. Lovely. With that, let me introduce our speaker and session for the day. Thank you, Dr. Shilpa, for presenting this session to us. Dr. Shilpa Datar is a distinguished professional with a psychology doctorate, specializing in Indian psychology, philosophy, and Advaita philosophy. And I had to literally Google what does some of those terms mean. I can't read her entire bio because it's an elaborate one, an illustrious one. I'm going to pick and choose things that are relevant to our session here. Her contributions extend globally through the development of psychometric tests designed to unveil the intricacies of mainstream personalities. Dr. Datta's scholarly pursuits are reflected in her numerous papers presented in national and international psychology conferences, as well as extensive publications in reputable journals. She is a member of the National Academy of Psychology of India and life member of the Karnataka Association of Clinical Psychologists. At the intersection of technology and psychology, Dr. Datar has developed a proprietary online software for personality profiling. Utilized globally, these tools facilitate self-discovery and are particularly recognized for their validated applications in studying Prakriti across various scenarios. I'm very curious to hear more about Prakriti. Her notable accolades include the prestigious Veda Brahma Award of Excellence of Innovation in 2012. As the founder of Swayam Analytics Private Limited, Dr. Datar leads a groundbreaking analysis platform. This platform plays a pivotal role in student career success, corporate hiring, and employee development through cutting-edge personality assessments. Swayam Analytics is in collaboration with Government of India and KSDC at their Skill Connect online portal, providing psychometric assessments for the job. No doubt we have her here to talk to us about knowing personality from an Indic systems understanding. Why this topic? There are several assessments we as coaches are used to doing, how do we show ROI, do a pre-assessment, post-assessment and see does magic happen. But all of these personality assessments are designed from a Western perspective. Most of them have not been standardized based on an Indian population and hence lack the insights that one can derive due to this issue. Additionally, the rich framework and insight that are available through these systems is also unavailable in Western systems, and I'm hoping Dr. Datar is going to shed some light on that. This is also due to the multi-pronged approach that the Indian systems use in order to assess people, psychological, physiological, ethical aspects of personality and behavior. There are many other reasons to ensure why that Indic system has a rich, accurate estimation of people's personalities, and we coaches can leverage information about personalities in our coaching conversations. Without much ado, let me please hand over the mic to Dr. Datar to take us through this journey. Over to you, Dr. Datar.
Thank you so much, Shanti. Thank you very much. That made me feel like I'm on top of the world, but let me assure you, I'm not so high yet. Certainly not. Just a very beginner in the field. And thank you very much for having me here and with this August, group of coaches. And coaching is something I've been in awe of because of the way you can transform a person, in their lifespan and how you can bring in multiple things into into a person's life. So can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
So first, I just want to, give a brief, uh, if I can say my own life and what made me to do this, so that it's more easier for you to understand. My journey as a professional began in about 97, 98, when I have two children, and one of my children was identified as being dyslexic. And I didn't know what dyslexic was, and the school wanted us to move them to a special needs school. We refused, and they continued in a regular school itself, while I started working with dyslexic children in a special needs school. And that's when I realized that all the tests that were being used to categorize these children, label them, were all foreign tests and were not relevant to India or Indians. And as administrators, we weren't able to understand what they were asking because there were such poor translations. Even though it was the English one itself, US English to Indian English, there's a lot of difference, I'm sure you know. And 97, 98, we were still not exposed so much. And so there was a lot of issues. And then, as administrators, when we couldn't understand, very badly classifying these children as learning disabled, dyslexia, so on and so forth, I found that this was a very, disheartening way of treating our children, and I wanted to set this right. So that's how I started my work. I went on to do my master's in psychology, and still there was no information in resource books, in online, nothing available about dyslexia and so on. And I started working in that area. And by then I was very disillusioned with the Western models, because if you look at Jung and Freud, they have studied people who have come into their clinics, people with issues, clinical issues. And then they said, if these are people with clinical issues, then what people who don't have these issues are normal. And I took serious exception to that, and I still do, because just because I don't have an issue doesn't mean that I'm normal. And you can't label somebody as, you don't have this, you don't have this, so you are a normal person. Normal people, fully functioning adults, are a majority in the world today. And, the deviation from that is what we need to identify, and then say, give them treatment and say that, this is what you are, so on and so forth. But that was an ulta way of looking at it, and I was not happy with that. And because of seeing all these negative things in the scenario there, when I worked around and saw, whether it's the corporate sector or even in the academic sector, the story was the same. There was nothing that was Indian. There was no standardization and very poor adaptations, and people could really make out nothing by that. Any number will talk. Numbers, the whole thing of numbers is that they have to give you some information, but whether that information is correct, whether it's relevant to the context, is something that is very important, which we learn in statistics. So I found that I wanted to develop tests that could help us identify, assess people. India is a massive population. To assess people which we could understand, which we could identify with, and which we could take across the world, not just limited to Bangalore, South India, Karnataka, and so on and so forth. So that's when I started working in that area, I came upon the Indian Vedic knowledge systems, the Panchamahabhutas. And that's where my journey started. I went on to do my PhD in psychology from RAE Mysore, which is NCRT, Regional Institute of Education, Mysore, and got my degree from there. And that's my journey, and that's how this whole thing started. And because I didn't want it to lie, gathering dust in a library somewhere, I said, I'm going to bring this out into the world, into local, applications, and develop my own software for the analysis. We have 1 patent, 8 copyrights, and 3 trademarks on that work. And we're using it with both students as well as with corporates. And to complete the story of my child, like I mentioned, I have 2 children. My son is older, and he is graduated as a lawyer. He set up his own law firm in Bangalore. My daughter also graduated as a lawyer. She's qualified as a solicitor, and she practices in Dublin. And I realized that, if I can do that for one child, I could go on and do it for thousands of other people. And that's how I'm here today. But I've not yet standardized it for special needs children. This is being standardized for normal, regular, rather than normal. I think regular would be a better word. Regular students, high school grades and above, as well as adults in both corporate and relationship settings. So that's where we are at. Yeah. So how did I do this work? So I studied the Vedas, the Upanishads, Sankhyan philosophy. Sankhya is atheistic, by the way. Yoga, Puranas, itihasas like Ramayana and Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita. And then Ayurveda, of course, and then imported these concepts. They have a lot of information about manas, behavior, mind, and all that, and imported these concepts into the domain of psychology, and then built the tests around that. So if you look at the Indian philosophical tradition, so Indian psychology is nothing but, we've taken the information from all these different texts, imported them into the domain of psychology, and we call it as Indian psychology simply for a lack of a better word that is there. Indian does not mean that it's only relevant to an Indian population. It's relevant to people across the world because it's based on the elemental, the 5 elements, like I mentioned earlier. I'll talk more about that as we go forward. In India, there are 3 principal methods of understanding personality and people. The first is the Panchakosha method, which comes to us from the Taittiriya Upanishadic perspective. Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha. So these are subtle, auras, if I can call them, and they're concentric. They're one within the other, more subtler than the other. The inner one is more subtler than the outer one. But because of its subtlety, it's very difficult for us to understand them and identify at what level, at what kosha the person is operating from. The second is a Tridosha perspective, which is purely on an Ayurvedic base. But both Ayurveda and yoga are completely based on the Sankhyan philosophy, which is atheistic. In Ayurveda, they bring in a lot of medical and medicinal aspect to it, while in yoga, they add the quality of Ishvara Pranidhana and then make it completely theistic. So we're not going to get into all those kind of aspects. Here we're only looking at how the Tridoshas help us understand people, because these Panchamahabhutas combine with each other at the physiological level, the physical physiological level, to form the Tridoshas of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. The same Panchamahabhutas combine with each other at the psychological level to form the Trigunas of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, which is common to all Darshanas in India. Darshana is a school of thought, your Vedas, Upanishads, they're all different Darshanas. And then including Ayurveda and Yoga. And that is common. If you look at Bhagavad Gita, if you look at the Upanishads, they all talk about Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. In fact, both the first earliest mention of the colors of the gunas, even colors are attributed to the gunas, is mentioned in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Both Tridoshas and Trigunas, like I mentioned, are composed of the Panchamahabhutas. So this is the Sankhyan underpinning based on which we have the entire, Tridosha, Triguna, Ayurveda, and Yoga, which is based on. So you have Prakriti on one side, which is completely insentient. And you have Purusha on the other side, which is the only one which is sentient. And they combine together, which is not sexual union. And then that evolves into Mahat, or cosmic intellect. Mahat again evolves and into the 3 kinds of ahankaras, which is Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. This Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas is completely different from the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas of the mental aspect, which I was talking to earlier. I'm sure you're all very aware that, in Sanskrit and in Indian philosophy, they talk about the same word in different meanings and have different connotations. So Sattva at the physiological level, psychological level, is very different from the Sattva that you're talking about at the Ahankara level. So there are different kinds of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. This evolution from the Mahat into Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, this again evolves into the 11 senses and the elements and substances. The 11 senses are the 5 intellectual and subjective senses, the 5 objective senses, and the manas. The elements are the 5 subtle elements and the 5 gross elements. Now, what is this Panchamahabhutas? Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Up, and Prithvi. So Akasha is ether, not sky. Ether, air, fire, water, and earth. These are the 5 elements. If you look at any of the religious texts, and I'm not trying to bring in religion over here, but there's a need why I want to mention this. So if you look at any of the religious texts, not looking at religion, but even if you look at philosophy also, they all talk about how we are made from we are born from dust and we go back to dust. And if you look at cosmology, If you look at, how the how these people talk about, the different stars and everything, they all say that we all have the same composition as the stars. So we are all a part of stardust. If you look at Carl Sagan, and if you've read and heard of them, heard their talks, they all talk about how we are all made of stardust. So Ayurveda codifies the whole thing and elucidates the whole thing, where they say that, how each of them combine with each other, in what combination and permutation, and how we get the how we get the tridoshas. So the pancha tanmatras are even more subtler than the pancha mahabhutas. So shabda tanmatra evolves into the akasha mahabhuta, which again evolves into the sense of hearing and the organ of ear. The same way, the five elements, the five tanmatras, evolve into their respective five elements, and that evolves into the respective senses and the organs, sense organs. So Akasha and Vayu, ether and air, combine with each other to form the Vata dosha. Fire and water, that is Agni and up, combine with each other to form the Pitta dosha. And water and earth, which is up and Prithvi, combine with each other to form the Kapha dosha. So if you look at it, all the five Panchamahabhutas, the Panchamahabhutas are represented over here. In the same way, Vata dosha is predominantly Rajasic in nature, but also has an element of Sattva in it. Pitta dosha is predominantly Sattvic in nature, but has an element of Rajas and Tamas in it. Rajas and Tamas generally go hand in hand. Wherever Rajas is there, Tamas, is joined at the hip and it goes along with it. And Kapha dosha is predominantly tamasic in nature, but also has an element of sattva in it. Now, this is the tridoshas and their blends. So if you look at, can you see my cursor? Yeah. So this is something that I've, developed, which I've made it as a wheel kind of a thing, and then brought in a three, like the Mercedes-Benz kind of a thing, if you want to look at it like that way. So there are three parts to the wheel. One is Vata, the gray color is the Vata, then the Pitta and the Kapha. But the minute you do that, you also realize that you can have combinations. I can be a Vata Kapha combination or a Kapha Vata combination also, which is what this indicates. So this is predominantly Kapha with a Vata in it. So this is a Kapha Vata combination, while this is a Vata Kapha combination. 19-20 ka fark. So they're very much similar. In the same way, you have a combination of Vata Pitta Pitta Vata and Kapha Pitta Pitta Kapha. And the one in center is something that is tripartite. It's, all three of them are equally present in the person. So depending on which aspect is dominant in you, you're going to behave predominantly in a way that, like if Vata dosha is dominant in you, what are the characteristics of Vata? So those are the characteristics that you're going to exhibit when you are interacting with people, when you think, when you talk, when you respond to people, and so on. In the same way, so this is the physiological aspect. The tridoshas are the physiological aspect of people. This is the psychological aspect, the trigunas, your mental makeup, your mental attribute. So again, you have the three, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and then you have combinations of sattva, tamas, tamas, sattva, sattva, rajas, rajas, sattva, and rajas, tamas, tamas, rajas. And then you have the 10th one, which is the person who is equally, dominant in all three. So when I say that a person is sattva dominant or rajas dominant, it does not mean that the person doesn't have sattva and tamas in them. They do have it, but at a lesser level. Let's say that this is at 8, the other, just a number, the sattva and tamas might be at 6 or 7 or something like that. There can never be a state when the other two doshas or the other two gunas are completely absent in a person. That never happens. So let's look at the quality or the characteristics that the doshas give you. Vata, what is Vata? It's a combination of air and ether. So what is the quality of air? It is unpredictable. It is erratic in all behavior. It's fast, it's restless, it's creative, and it can go anywhere and do anything. Those are exactly the characteristics that it gives the person in which it is dominant, in whom it is dominant. So if you look at Pitta dosha, Pitta is fire. So people, Pitta is also, it can tear you apart. I mean, it can burn you. It's very sharp. It's, aggressive. And it also denotes passion. So people with Pitta dominant, who have a dominance of Pitta, are short-tempered, they're precise, they're very decisive. They're also very aggressive, and they're also very passionate about causes, about things that are close to their heart. And they're also they're very action-oriented. Kapha is very stable, it's predictable, it's slow, it's dedicated, and it's very thorough in all activities. So if you look at this, the combinations, of course, this is just the three, categories. But again, you have combinations over here, no? Like I showed you earlier. You have Vata, Pitta, Pitta, Vata, Vata, Kapha, Kapha, Vata, and so on and so forth. So all those combinations are again combinations of this, of the quality of Vata and Pitta, combine it, and then you get a person who is a combination of Vata and Pitta, and so on and so forth. The same way, what is Sattva? Sattva is intelligence, fortitude, gentle, being truthful, benevolent, virtuous, and somebody who's very, Sattva is very neutral in the sense it doesn't act. It needs something like Rajas to make it act. Like, take for example, Haldi. So Haldi is very inert. Sattva is inert. So it needs an injection of Rajas or Tamas for it to act. Depending on what is the injection that it gets. If it is Rajas, then it moves, in a very passionate way, but in a very truthful, passionate way. If it is Tamas, it can move in a very untruthful, passionate way. So you need to be very careful what the combination is and take care how you deal with the person. Going ahead, there are 7 or 10 types of dosha and guna combinations, like I just showed you earlier. And then you have 16 classical personality types. This is a taxonomy, and I'll show you also how. And I've also been able to identify 189 traits that run the entire gamut of human behavior. There are 100 sattvic traits, 60 rajasic traits, and 29 tamasic traits. So there are different types of sattva, rajas, and tamas as well. There are 7 types of sattvic personalities, 6 types of rajasic, and 3 types of tamasic personalities. And again, you can have combinations, permutations over there. And in the 189 traits, you have 100 sattvic, 60 rajasic, and 29 tamasic traits. So when I say, I'd like to, if it's possible, I'd like to open up a little bit for a couple of, questions over here. Can anybody tell me what you think about this? If you look at Brahma Sattva, and right at the bottom, you have Vanaspatya Sattva over here. Vanaspatya Sattva is somebody who is, Vanaspatya itself tells you that it is like a tree or a plant which doesn't move, like a vegetable. And if you look at Brahma Sattva, it's also known as Brihaspati Sattva, which is considered the most epitome of, Brahma. Brahma is a know-all. He's a creator of the entire universe. So it's a complete, somebody who is very enlightened, who's reached that level, and, things like that. So if you look at it from Vanaspatya Sattva to Brahma Sattva, there's an entire taxonomy of people that, you have. And all of us fall into any of these categories, combinations and permutations, of course, because you can never say one person is only Brahma Sattva, doesn't have Asha, Varuna, or even Asura, Rakshasa in it, or even Pashava and all that. Because I told you that Tamas always goes hand in hand with Rajas. There's never been a time when Tamas is, not there when a Rajasic quality is there. So they're always hand in hand, joined at the hip. So this is an entire taxonomy. And this is where your coaching comes in a big way. Because if you look at it, I could have somebody who's at, and don't get upset by looking at the names, especially Asura Sattva, Rakshasa Sattva and all that. Because the meanings that were there when this was developed, like maybe 5,000, 10,000 years ago in Sanskrit, those meanings are lost today. We have evolved, the meanings have evolved. And in today's day and age, we have completely different kinds of interpretations that we give them. So I have translated the names into English, loose translations again, because nothing that you do will exactly capture the essence of Sanskrit, like I'm sure many of you know. So some of them have been very loosely translated, and we are not using these names also because, in our reports, especially because people don't accept it. So ignoring your uncomfortableness, if you have any with regard to the names, if you look at it, it's a complete taxonomy of evolution of human mind, personality, and behavior. From Vanaspatya Sattva, which is a vegetative state, to Brahma Sattva, which is the most evolved state. And this is where I feel the biggest contribution from coaches can come in. Because when you are speaking to your client, when you identify their issues, when you identify what your roadblocks are, and you're able to see at what level they are functioning and help them evolve to the level that they want to be, that is, I think, the biggest contribution that you can give to mankind, if I may say that. Because to help people evolve from a lower state to a highly evolved state is what you people specialize in. So going forward, just a very brief introduction to how I developed the scales. The items were items in the sense the questions were developed based on the literature available in Vedas, Upanishads, Sankhya, Ayurveda, and so on. I identified statements dealing with behavior and state of the manas, sought approval from a board of scholars from the different domains of philosophy, Sanskrit, Ayurveda, yoga, and psychology, because this was a multidisciplinary work. And the tests underwent 47 revisions each. There are the set of 3 tests. The first one is based on the Tridoshas, the second one based on the Trigunas, and the third one is an add-on to the other 2 because we needed so much more information. And it has been standardized on 5th standard, 5th grade government school children, so that, even that age children can answer it clearly, so that there's simplicity, there's no arbitrariness, there's clarity in what we're trying to ask, and nobody gets confused. So we've developed our own software for the analysis, like I mentioned to you earlier. We have 1 patent, 8 copyrights, and 3 trademarks on it. How do we apply this in day-to-day life? For students, we do a behavioral challenge identification for personality development, career guidance, and SWOT analysis for undergrad, postgrad students. Corporates, we're working with them for recruitment, employee engagement and development, and also coaching and training. I don't coach or train, but corporates are using it to identify areas where they can give the employees coaching and training. Others are yoga, matrimonial relationship, and research, and so on. So I want to give you a little bit of an example now. So if you look at the person on the left, somebody who's very stable, a methodical kind of a person, and we recommend that they go in for desk jobs, like a CA or an administrative role, or even a role where, they're the head of a manufacturing unit, where they need to give a lot of attention to the kind of things that are turned out. They have to look at the finer points. The devil is in the details kind of a thing. Detail orientation is their byword. While the person on the right is very creative, very high energy, they're not the kind of people who are going to be methodical or detail oriented. That would be completely beyond their scope. So how do you identify these people, and then you bring in actionable points for them, get them to, set goals where they want to reach based on this taxonomy, and then help them achieve that. That is what coaches, a couple of the coaches that we're working with, that's what they are able to achieve. So again, I'm coming back to, this is the kind of reports that we offer. I brought it in as an example to show it to you all. So we assess people on the physiological, the psychological, as well as the ethical aspects of personality and behavior. So the one on the top is the score, the physiological score, and then the interpretation, the psychological score, and the interpretation. We don't talk about Sanskrit or any of the jargons anymore because it's not a very acceptable thing, because people don't understand Sanskrit. These are also some of the other competencies that we assess. We've added a few more. I wasn't able to add that in today, where in the business people and the self element, and how all this is ties in with the person's personality and how they are exhibiting it, how they are interacting with the world in. And this is another area where coaches have been using our test, where they are identifying team roles or roles that the person is good at performing in addition to their own existing roles. Because in our normal daily life, we are not exposed to identify other areas where we would like to function. But the minute a person has about 15, 18 years of experience, that's when they realize that, their work has become mechanical, that they want to find some more joy in what they're doing and see how else they can contribute back to society. And this is where we are able to bring in that kind of information that they would like to know and help coaches to identify these things and then take it forward with their clients. Again, another area, of course, all of us have helpful and neutral traits. The traits are areas where coaches really play a major role, because this is like, let's say that I'm dominating. I come to you for, help with it. And you are able to identify what are the, things that you can help me with, how to reduce my dominance and be more assertive rather than being aggressive and argumentative or being dominant. So those are some areas where I feel that, you would be able to add a hell of a lot of work, a lot of value. And then we also identify the competencies and whether they're functioning at a low, medium, or a high level. High level, of course, you really don't need to do anything. But the low and the medium areas are where there is a lot of meat and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And this is irrespective of any organization. Every one of the employees have certain areas which, we need to help them overcome and come up to, which will really add value both to the employee as well as the employer, the company, for them to reach their growth and deadlines. This is some of the ways that in which that we are giving them, interpretation of their own scores and caution and growth areas that they can take up. And we also provide them, resources to overcome, which are freely available online. But we don't do any coaching as such. We tie up with coaches to do that. Again, a little bit about how we do it. It's completely online. It's a software it's driven by a software. I've combined the ancient Vedic or the Indic knowledge systems, which assess people on the physiological, psychological, and ethical aspects, and combined it with modern psychometric methodology, including data and statistical analysis, to give you the interpretation of a person based on the physiological, psychological, and ethical orientation. And we've already demonstrated it in multiple areas. And our tests are being used. There are 17 plus paper publications that I have in international journals. And I got my PhD based on this work. And we are the only company in the world which assesses people on the physiological, psychological, and ethical aspects of personality. Our knowledge advisory was composed of 2 Padma Shri awardees, university deans, professors, and so on. And we have 1 patent, 8 copyrights, and 3 trademarks. And the tests are also accredited by Indian Institute of Business Psychology. These are some of the awards that I've received, and our tests, like I mentioned, are being used in multiple countries, in Creighton University in the US, and Duesenberg University in Germany. And we had a small startup. We've received a Startups in India seed fund. We're incubated at JSS Step, Deshpande Startups, and Wadhwani Foundation. And we're partnered with Government of Karnataka and KSTC on their Skill Connect portal for working with job seekers. And our tests are being used by multiple MNCs, both in India and outside India. Any questions, I'd be very happy to take them.
I have one question, Dr. Shilpa.
Sure.
Can I go?
Sure, sure.
You spoke about the tests which are based on 3 doshas and 3 gunas.
Yeah.
So according to the knowledge which I have, so somebody wants to work on their health, and in Ayurveda also, when you try to get a person out of a particular disease or something, so what they try to do is get the balance between the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And in case of Trigunas also, there might be some of the events, or say, for example, coaching itself can change the balance between these 3 gunas. I might find out something new about myself and I suddenly become a very creative person. Like I know a person who started writing poems overnight, something like that. Something changed for the person and she started writing poems a lot. So have you seen that your tests and the test results change with change in the 3 doshas or change in the 3 gunas?
No. So first is whatever my constitution is, whether it is Vata dominant, Pitta dominant, whatever combination of doshas and gunas, they are set at the time of my conception in my mother's womb. And that doesn't change. What happens is you can modify your behavior. You can't change a person, and especially not their nature. Like it's like me asking you, because if you look at Ayurveda, then your the color of your skin, the color of your hair, the color of your eye also is part of who you are. Can you change that? It's impossible. In
No.
the same way, yeah, in the same way, you can't change your nature or your whether it's the physiological or the psychological nature. You can modify it based on the nurture principle. One is the nurture principle, second is environment, third is maturity of the person. And what you learn, we all learn things. So today I'm talking to you, I learned something from here. I find that is very interesting, or I like it very much, and I adapt it into my life. And going forward, I make a note of it. I try to bring that into my life, and adapt it to a certain extent where it becomes a part of me. So to give you a very small example, I go back to the classical text itself. We have Vishwamitra, who is later considered one of the Saptarishis. But initially, he was a king. Yeah, he was a king. And then he came across Vasishta, who was the first Saptarishi. And then he realized that, he wanted to be like Vasishta. He wanted to be called a Brahmarishi as well. And then he said, I'm going to do meditation. I'm going to do japa, tapa and all that. And then he set out to do it, and he did it for thousands of years. And then he developed that kind of concentration, that kind of, siddhi over himself and his manas and everything. And then what happens is that to test him, I think Menake or somebody else is asked to go and taunt him. And then he loses his temper on Menake. He gets angry and he gives her a curses her. The minute he curses her, he realizes his mistake, and he says, what have I done? I have lost all the, the siddhi that I attained because of thousands of years of japa, tapa and practice. And then he's upset with himself, and then he goes, and then he says he quits everything. And then he goes back and he does, meditation and japa, tapa and tapasya and all that for another 1,500 years. So my point is, if somebody like Vishwamitra, who had so much control over himself, whom we consider to be a Maharshi, Brahmarshi now, one of the Saptarishis now, could not control himself, could not control his inherent nature of being a Kshatriya, of being passionate, what chance do we have? Correct? If you bring it into the modern world today, it's the same way. You instruct so many people, you teach them, you bring them, you do a lot of coaching. They learn from you. They're able to modify it. But in times of stress, it does go back to their original behavior. So I hope I'm clear about that.
Yeah, definitely.
As far as your other question related to saying that, the person practically started writing poems overnight. Maybe the person was writing poems in secret earlier. Were not talking about it, but then they were able to, go to some classes or whatever, I don't know, and then modify that and, polish that trait in them and that quality in them so that they could write poems in a much better way, which then became aware for everybody. I'm not sure that I can believe that, today I don't know how to write a poem, but tomorrow I know how to write a poem. That's very difficult, unheard of for me, especially. And I don't know if that's even possible. What could have happened is that they didn't tell anybody about it, but then they might have realized that they have this in them, learned a few techniques, and then brought it out for the world to see. Maybe a little bit more questioning them would help you and us understand that better.
Sure. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Shilpa, I have a question. The name is
Sure,
Dr.
sir.
Behaviour.
Sure, sir.
I went to an Ayurvedic specialist recently, and I had an ailment, and he held on to my wrist and gave me an explanation of where I stand with regard to Kapha, Pitta, and Vata. And he gave me some Ayurvedic potions, some exercises, and I got cured. You did tell me that these are actually physical attributes that are measurable. Is there some way, yes, is there some way one can measure the gunas, the sattva, rajas, and tamas?
Yes.
Or is it only through behavior?
No, what I have done is to develop the test to assess these gunas and doshas.
Okay, so like I talked about somebody holding the wrist and giving a,
Yeah,
like that
that is the nadi. That is the nadi one. You hold the
right.
wrist and you do it.
Right.
Yeah. So what we do is, so the first difference over here is that when the Ayurvedic doctor does it, they're trying to see where the imbalance is, the vikriti as they call it.
Right.
So we don't assess vikriti in Swayam. For me, what I do, I don't do the medical assessment. What I do is the prakriti assessment. What your natural state is, we assess that. Because we are not providing any medicines to you.
Okay.
Like the Ayurvedic doctors. We are not trying to bring you back into balance or something. We believe, because when you answer our test, you're answering it as you feel over the last 6 months. And this is a psychometric test. So Nadi Shastra, again, there's only one family in Kerala who does it. Nobody else in the world is able to do it as perfectly as them. So that Nadi Shastra itself has become a, died science, dead science as of now.
Okay.
So we don't assess Vikriti, we assess only the Prakriti. And even in Prakriti, like I mentioned earlier, skin color, hair color, body build, that kind of a thing, eye color and all that, we don't look at that because they are very, very subjective. Because my height in India is probably average. If I go to the US or Europe, I'm short, I'm considered short over there. So that becomes a very subjective kind of an understanding, in interpretation. But if you look at, the physiological aspect, which are objectively assessed, like what is the kind of sleep that I get, what kind of food I eat, do I talk fast, do I talk slow? Those are very objective ones. Correct? So what we do, the tests that I've built are only for objective assessments. They are not subjective in nature, which is why we are able to give an 85% accuracy in our reports, which nobody else can. And our reliability, Cronbach alpha reliability, I'm sure many of you must be knowing, being in the coaching field. Cronbach alpha reliability is in the range of 0.965, which is again one of the highest in the world.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
I have another related question. You talked about
Sure.
meditation.
Yeah.
Does meditation lead to a balance of the gunas?
Yes, it does. It leads to a balance of both the doshas and the gunas. It calms you down. Again, and you need to constantly meditate, and you need to be constantly aware of the imbalance so that you're able to, calm down and bring yourself back into balance. That's when you find that inner peace, that ekagrata, one-pointedness, what they say. Indriya Nigrahana.
When you say constantly meditate,
constantly is every day. We need to practice it every day, right?
Okay, a few minutes a day or something.
A few minutes a day, yes.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Sarah, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Shilpa. I appreciate all of your knowledge that you have, and you must have studied a lot of years on this. I very much appreciate you sharing that. And it's impossible to understand to the level that you have. I would like to understand. I appreciate very much you indicating this is kind of the only insight about personalities that exists from the Asian perspective, and it's highly necessary to do that work. And so I appreciate a lot that we don't only have Western perspective.
Thank you.
Where do you see the biggest differences? You indicate, I mean, there are multiple dimensions that in Western personality is not visible. Where specifically do you see these kind of gaps? Are you able to pinpoint those? Do you see like there specifically, or is it just in general?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I would like to understand when you indicate that this has much more dimensions than standard Western personality. On what areas do you see it? Is it in general, or are there specific parts of personality that are missing in Western views?
Yeah. So if you look at the Western understanding of personality, it's very, very unidimensional. They only look at the psychology aspect of it. Correct? They don't look at the physiology of the person or even the ethical orientation of the person. There's always been the Cartesian dichotomy of the body and the mind. They feel that, understanding the person by the mind is enough. You don't need to understand the body. But then if I'm not well physically, if I'm physically unwell, I will not be able to contribute to anything in the way that I can when both my body and the mind and my mind are working in tandem, and they are whole and they are fit and fine. Okay. Added to it is your ethical orientation. You need to know the ethical orientation of the person, especially when you're bringing them into financial areas. In fact, the university that I spoke about in the US, they used our test to identify people who are at risk of committing economic fraud. And they were able to do that successfully, and that's a published paper by them. So this is the kind of research or work that I don't see happening in the West, where they combine the person at the physical, physiological, psychological, ethical aspects, spiritual aspects, and then understand a person in totality. That multi-dimensional understanding of people is completely lacking with that.
Amazing.
Then they also don't account for evolution of human beings. Like I mentioned over here, we are all constantly evolving. We are learning, we're evolving. We're all trying to be a better person, at least people who are aware. And we're all existing at different levels. If you look at people probably from this level downwards, they're not aware of themselves at all, of what they want to do, how they want to evolve, how they want to grow, and so on. It's the people who are at this level up to maybe one or two over here who really want to know about themselves, how they can grow, what is it that they can do, and things like that. And Western psychology has absolutely no idea about evolution of human psyche. At least they don't talk about it in any literature. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. There's a question in the text chat by Ram. First, he's thanking you for the interesting session. And the question is, does the system have any similarities or overlap with Enneagram?
Overlap with any other?
Enneagram. Enneagram is a similar...
Enneagram. No. So, like I mentioned earlier, the East and the West are very different. So there is no overlap with Enneagram or MBTI or, Big Five. They're based on psychology. That's about it. That's all. All of them are based on Western psychology, and this is based on Eastern or Indian psychology.
Smita, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so especially a very good evening to Shilpa. She's an old friend. So yeah. Very glad to see how far you have come, Shilpa. Congratulations.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you.
Wonderful to see this session happening with ICF Bengaluru. And I loved the way it is now connected with coaches. When we last spoke, it was more about career paths and career guidance. And now we are attaching it for coaching as well. So congratulations on that too.
Thank you.
Definitely we'll connect later on and seeing how we can use this. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Smita.
Go ahead, Aarti.
Shilpa, will you be able to show a sample copy of report over here to us? And
Sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So this is of course, this is a dummy report. And then the first is the facing page where we just tell you the person's name, age, hobbies, and stuff like that. How to use the report and the different sections that are there in the report. We have completely avoided all jargons, Sanskrit words, names, everything. Completely, anglicized. The 3 tests that they have to take, each will take about 15 minutes to answer. So approximately 45 minutes to 1 hour. And then the competency framework that we have built. And then your physiological score and the interpretation, not the definition, interpretation, and the psychological score and the interpretation. The overall personality of the individual, again, this is based on the 16 classical personality types that I spoke to you about, the taxonomy thing, no? This is that interpretation of that. And then the team roles that, the person would perform well at in addition to what they're already doing. And then we identify if the person has answered the test honestly or not. And if the rating is high, that means that they have manipulated the test. We want this to be low. That's when they've answered the test honestly, and we can depend upon their answers. And they will be able to benefit immensely by answering honestly. And then the stress level of the individual, we assess it over the last few months. And that's again another area I forgot to mention. This is again another area where, you people can really add a lot to a person, give them coping techniques and so on. The workplace traits, what I showed you earlier, helpful, neutral. Trace traits are where we all have our negative traits. So rather than making it as negative, we made it as trace, so that, the person knows that these are areas where they really need to focus on and improve. And then the growth, this is the business element. And then we've just given 4 over here, the different competencies and where they lie. So process-driven problem solving and planning is low, while creative thinking is very high. The interpretations for these competencies, and then the rating, the interpretation, not definition. Sorry, this is the definition. Sorry. This is the definition for the competencies, the rating and the interpretation that for the person's behavior, and caution and growth areas. We have made that for all the, all the competencies. Same way for the people element, the graph, the definition, interpretation, rating, caution and growth areas. And then for the self element, the graph, definition, scoring and rating and interpretation, caution and growth areas. And then we've given them certain resources that are freely available online, not developed by us, but developed by other experts, which they can use to, these are clickable links, to read and overcome, watch videos on YouTube, or even listen to podcasts, which will help them overcome their weaknesses. That's all. That brings us to the end of the report.
Thanks, Dr. Shilpa. I have 2 questions, and then I'll take up Suresh's question in the chat. You said there is one question that allows you to gauge how honestly the person has attempted. So
yeah,
if
not
the report...
one question. It's a series of questions that we have built.
Okay. So how easy is it to fake the assessment?
Not easy.
Not easy. Right. And for coaches to be able to, so if we have to run this report for any of our clients, do we need any sort of a certification? How does that work? We don't need.
No, you won't need any certification. What we will do is, once your client takes the test, we'll share the report with you. We'll explain the report like how I explained this. We'll explain each and every aspect of the report with you. We'll handhold you for the first 5, 10, 15 sessions, 15 client reports that whatever you want to take. And then by then you'll be able to handle it on your own. So once we finish the debriefing with you, you can take it up with your client and you'll be more than equipped to handle it with your client.
A question from Suresh in the chat is, thank you for this splendid research. Shilpa, is this an assessment which can be administered for school, college going kids, etc.?
Yes. So this particular assessment is 1 hour long. So this is meant only for employee development. So we collect about 450, 500 data points from a person once they complete this assessment. It's a 1 hour long questionnaire. But we only reveal very few of these in this. In addition to doing all this, when we work with corporates, we do a group analysis where we tell them much more information. They would have asked us hundreds of other things. So we give them information about all that to the corporates. When we work with corporates for recruitment or even with students, we use a shorter version of it because they don't have the patience to answer a 1 hour long questionnaire. So the questionnaire that we have built for them is just is a subset of the questions that we have for this one, which takes only 15 minutes to answer. And we work with students from 8th grade to undergrad, postgrad, and MBA levels.
Go ahead, Ram.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Dr. Shilpa. That was a fantastic session.
Thank you.
I really would like to congratulate you for taking this up and taking this Indic method of assessment and coming up with such a detailed way of doing it. I have been looking to understand if anybody has done it through Indic science, and I really resonate with what whatever you shared. So if you would like to know more, Dr. Shilpa, how do we get to know more about this? Is it only through your website, or do you have any sessions happening?
As of now, it's only through my website. But we're planning to bring out a certificate course in this. So hopefully through that, you'll be able to get more information.
Okay, on how this is developed and what is the background basis and all those details, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was trying to look for my, contact details. I realized that is in the other slide, not in this one.
So, Shilpa, is this multilingual or it's only in English?
It's available in English, Kannada, and Hindi.
Okay.
The tests are available in English, Kannada, and Hindi. The reports that we're working for the government of Karnataka is available in Kannada. But the rest of the reports are available only in English because, most of the people, the CHROs or the HRs we work with, they don't want to look at the reports in Hindi and Kannada and all that.
True.
Yeah.
And for the teenagers that you mentioned, that 15-minute test, how many questions does it have?
30 questions, 15 and 15.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Shilpa.
You're welcome.
Hello. Is the session over?
Kumaraswamy, do you have a question? I'm not sure if he's asking something.
Yeah, I had a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Now, having heard Shilpa ji, I just want to subject my children to her assessment. How do I go ahead?
You can contact me, sir, and I can by email or by phone number or call me or send me an email, and then I can send you the, I can interact with you.
Thank you. And second observation I have made is, I was fascinated by seeing the Swayam logo. It was very attractive. And also I correlated with government websites on education also have the same name.
Yes, that's Government of India's learning platform, Swayam.
I was saying, yes. Both are connected or not connected?
No, completely not connected. Ours is older than theirs. Yeah.
Right. That is the thing I had in mind to ask you the clarity. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Shilpa, do you want to show that slide with your contact again for people? People will give it a couple of more minutes to see if there are any follow-on questions, and I'll take this time to announce our next session on 4th March. It is yet again on another assessment. It's on Harrison assessments this time. I've pasted the details in the chat. On March 4th, please do register. And if there are any further questions for Dr. Shilpa, just raise your hand and we can take them. If not, thank you so much, Dr. Shilpa. It was wonderful I am
Thank you.
intrigued. I've been scribbling names that you've been mentioning. I want to go and read up more on those. So I have my month of reading sorted. And thanks everyone for having those meaningful questions and engaging in the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you so much, Shanti, for inviting me here.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.